This week, the Clarets travelled to Leicester, hoping to put an end to Brendan Rodgers' 100% home record against the mighty Clarets. This is the Nona Never podcast. Hello and welcome to the Nona Never podcast. I am your host, Natalie Bromley, and joining me this week is regular panellist and one member of the first family of Burnley Football Club, Tom Whitaker. Tom, welcome.
Evening, Natalie. Feels like it's been a long time since we've done a podcast, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I mean, we had the international break last week and I was away for the preview show, so I feel like I'm all new again. I'm sure it will be fun. I'm sure it's like riding a bicycle. We have got not a massive amount to talk about this week, actually. It's probably going to be a relatively short podcast, I think. But we are, of course, looking back over the Clarets' defeat away at Leicester at the weekend. They fell to a controversial, shall we say, I don't think there's anybody who's going to disagree with that, 2-1 loss away at the Foxes. But it was a good performance and we were incredibly unlucky in the end. So let's have a look at this game. And of course, the talking point this week is going to be our friend VAR again, because why wouldn't it be? But Tom, you travelled down to Leicester at the weekend. Generally speaking, I thought it was an all right performance, actually. I thought we competed well.
Yeah, I think especially compared to the last two away games, Brighton and Villa, I think we played better than we did in either of those games. And against the better opponent as well, we stepped up well in the game for the whole 90 minutes. I know Leicester had a lot of the ball, but I don't think, apart from the goals, Nick Pope's had a massive amount to do. Competed really well. I think the big difference this season, especially away from home, is we really look like we've got a goal in us. And you really felt that on Saturday. I think perhaps the Brighton game, it came in dribs and drabs. Villa, there was quite a lot of that game where we were under the cosh and sitting back. But on Saturday, you always felt like we had a goal in us, whether it was 0-0, whether we were 2-1 down. You always thought that we had that chance to get something. And I think, it's probably the best away performance we've seen probably since the first half at Wolves.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think that's a really valid point. I think Dyche touched on this in his post-match interview. He took the positives from the game, obviously the ridiculous shafting aside. And he's sort of looking at that bigger picture and saying that we are a better side than we were this time last year, in that, we are improving, we can compete now in these games. Now, unfortunately, Leicester are also a much better side than they were this time last year, and I think it's fair to say that they are probably the third best side in the Premier League at the moment, in my opinion anyway. But actually I thought they were quite out of sorts in the first half, and I thought Burnley handled them really well, and it was perhaps easier than I expected it was going to be by half time. But Tom, before we even got on the pitch, we were not rocked a little bit, but it was a frustrating news coming out of turf that we have now got to that regular, it feels regular anyway, phase of being injury hit. Before the game, we'd heard that Gudmundsson's going to be out for about 6 weeks with a hamstring. Ashley Barnes didn't make it as well. He had a groin strain, I think that was. And Court's still injured as well. So we had a bit of a different lineup with Jay Rodriguez starting up front with Wood and Brady coming into the side. So I guess starting with Jay, Tom, how did you think he stepped up, not playing that three up front, but playing alongside Chris Wood in a 4-5-2? We didn't sneak an extra player on the pitch. In like a 4-4-2, or sometimes dropping back a bit into a 4-5-1, depending on the formation. I think he did all right. How did you take that?
Yeah, he didn't look out of place. He didn't look. He stepped into the side like he'd been here a lot longer than he has for me. I think perhaps the problem for Jay on Saturday was we didn't have a lot of the ball, and I think he does his best work when he's getting balls into feet, when he's getting on the end of things. I think that because we were sitting quite deep for a lot of the game, or because we probably didn't have a lot of the ball in midfield, he's having to chase big balls forward. He's having to chase the balls into the corners, and I think in terms of the hold-up play, in terms of being back to goal at the minute, Wood is doing that really well, and I think that's more Barnes' game than Rodriguez. So I think perhaps we did miss a little bit of Barnes' physicality, a little bit of his mothering of the defenders. We got a lot of that from Wood, so it perhaps didn't impact on the team performance as much. But I think perhaps it wasn't the ideal game for Jay to really show the skill set that he's got that sets him apart from Barnes and Wood for me. But I don't think he did bad. When he did get on the ball, he made things happen. He put himself about. He didn't shy away. So I think it was an encouraging performance. But I think there'll be games that he shines in more this season, definitely.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And as we saw away at Villa, when he's able to come on and play with three up front, I think that's definitely where we've seen the best of him so far. That said, I thought he linked up with McNeil quite well, actually. There's some quite encouraging link-up play, I think, certainly when they were creating chances.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's one of McNeil's best games this season, and I think that's probably a good point that you get a bit more of a link between the midfield and the attack when Rodriguez is playing as opposed to Barnes and Wood. So I think Rodriguez is a bit better with the ball at his feet than either of those two, and he's a bit more probably creatively minded, I would say, than those two as well. So yeah, I think probably one of McNeil's best games of the season. So probably fair to deduce that it was playing alongside Jay that probably brought a bit of that out of him as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I just personally think as well that regardless of what we do, I just think that McNeil plays better with Charlie Taylor in the team. I think he'd started to try and get a little bit of build-up play and a bit of understanding with Peters, but I much prefer having him with Charlie Taylor on the pitch. Another start for Robbie Brady, who is somebody we've not seen for a while, Tom. Now, this is a difficult one because for some reason Brady isn't that popular with a lot of Burnley fans, and we saw quite a lot of stick over the weekend. Basically, people just saying that we're a bit fed up with him now, and he's a bit of a waste of money, a bit of a passenger. We just need to get rid. But I think what we were talking about off air, you're feeling pretty confident, and I think you're giving him a bit of a break. Really, I think you just want to see him play some games. Is that fair to say, Tom?
Yeah, that sums it up for me. I think Brady's really underrated actually by a lot of our fans. I think if you think back to the last time that he was really fit and had a good run of games in the team, which was the middle of the season that we got into Europe, the last couple of games he played before he got injured, which I think was Bournemouth away on the Wednesday night. We won 2-1, I think, and he scored a storming goal in that game. He had a fantastic game. Him and Defoe really ran that game, and he played really, really well. The game after that, actually, funnily enough, was Leicester away. That was the game that he got the big injury in, and he was playing really well before then as well. I can understand why people criticise him to an extent because we definitely haven't seen anything like that sort of form from him since he's been back on the pitch. He's been back in dribs and drabs. He's had a lot of little niggly injuries on top of that big one that he got. But for me, he just needs a run. And I think perhaps the injury to Goodmanson, like you said, he's going to be out for a few weeks now. It might prove to be a blessing in disguise for Brady if we can keep getting him on the pitch and getting starts 60, 70 minutes. I think we'll start to see the best of him again. I think when he was in the team every week before, he linked up really well with Hendrick. Obviously, Defoe's gone now. He did link up well with him as well. But I think he's got a really good delivery with the left foot. Perhaps don't need that as much now. McNeil's back, but I think for me, Brady, I think he's as good as Goodmanson, and I think if he does get a good run now, if he does get a few games under his belt and can stay fit, then I think we'll see the best of him again. And I think there's a little bit of an element of short memories, I think, with some of our fans with some of the criticism that I see him get. Like, I understand that he hasn't played well in the last year, but I don't think he's been horrendous. And I think if you put it in context, I think it's understandable that he's not captured his best form. So I'm hoping and I'm looking forward to seeing him get a bit of a run in the team if Johan is injured, and I think we'll start to see the best of him again.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I think he's been unlucky with injuries, like you say, and I think he's also struggled to hold down his place in the team because of that. But I still think he's got the ability to create something in this league, and I think he's got the ability to be that luxury player that we all want him to be. And like you say, Tom, in that thing, Hendrick also seems to thrive a little bit more when Brady's on the pitch as well. So let's see what happens now with JBG being out for a while and see if that makes a difference. Because I think if in the next sort of 3 games or so he's still not quite rediscovered that spark, then I think perhaps question marks around his ability/performance are probably more justified than they are now. But I do find it quite interesting that when when fans have been questioning the impact that Jay has had so far, very much the overwhelming feeling has been, he's not been playing for a while. It's a new team. You've got to give him some time. He just needs games. But that patience doesn't seem to be afforded to Brady, and I feel like both him and Brady and Hendrick, seem to be in this negative sphere with some fans. I don't know. I agree with you, Tom. I think he will improve, and I'm looking forward to seeing that improve in the next few weeks. Anyway, do we know why Charlie Taylor wasn't playing on Saturday? By the way, I don't remember seeing anything pre-game. But obviously Peters was back at left back, and I don't remember. I don't remember seeing anything as to why Taylor wasn't in the side.
I suppose knowing Dyche, we know that he doesn't like to drop people unless he has to. I think everyone expected the way Peters went down and he went off against Everton. I think everyone was expecting that he was going to be out for a little bit of time and that Taylor was going to get his chance. But I wasn't surprised that when it came out that Peters was fit. I wasn't surprised to see him starting, to be honest.
Yeah, it's down to personal preference really, but I was kind of disappointed. I think, as I was saying before, I much preferred Charlie Taylor playing with McNeil, and I would quite like Charlie Taylor back in the side as soon as possible. But never mind. What do I know? The other player spotlight to have a look at is definitely our striker of the hour, Tom, Chris Wood, as he had a barren first 5 games of the Premier League campaign and has now catapulted back into the limelight with 2 legitimate goals, Premier League, this weekend. And he almost got a third as well. There was that bounce that he just couldn't quite get his toe onto that Schmeichel managed to get at in the first half. But I think it's quite fair to say that he is certainly the man of the moment, don't you think?
Yeah, I've been really, really impressed with Wood this season. I think the problem I always had with Wood was that when he played on his own up front, or when he was the number 9, the out-and-out leading striker, he's a little bit timid. He'd allow himself to get bullied by centre-halves. I think the reason that he flourished with Barnes next to him initially was because Barnes was doing a lot of that dirty work for him, beating up the centre-halves, drawing them, giving Wood a bit of space to play in. But one thing that I think Wood has really improved in this season, and we saw it in the odd game last season. Remember Bournemouth away, he did a really good job on Chris Metham. But what he's been doing consistently this season is that sort of dirty work off the ball, beating up the centre halves, winning the headers. His back to goal plays improved a lot this season, I think, and it's starting to show. In the consistency of his performances. He's always been someone who can chip in with goals. I think he's always been a little bit of a streaky player in that he'll go maybe 4 or 5 games without scoring, and then he'll get 3 or 4 on the bounce. We've seen that in previous seasons as well. But I know last season especially he was quite a slow starter. I know he got a couple in Europe, but I think it was end of October at West Ham before he actually scored in the league last season. So to have 4 already at this point is an improvement on that. And on Saturday he was man of the match for me. He didn't give those 2 centre halves a moment's peace. I think the Turkish chap who plays centre half for Leicester, I think, is it Sonyuku? He was quite lucky to avoid a yellow card for bringing Wood down. Obviously, he got the goal. Like you say, he was unlucky with that one in the first half as well. He anticipated it well. And obviously, the disallowed goal as well, he was really unlucky with. So, I wonder if maybe Barnes not playing as well has allowed him to step up a little bit in that particular performance, because we really saw him leading the line in a way that maybe he doesn't have to when Barnes is on the pitch with him. So that was really encouraging to see as well, that he has got that in his locker and he could step up and do that. So fantastic. Definitely one of our best performers so far this season for me.
Absolutely, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. And I think it's quite interesting to see what the pundits' view of Wood and Barnes is, and I've seen quite a few references to it being one or the other, and almost saying that it's a massive strength of Burnley's, in that it doesn't matter if one of them's having an off day because the other one will step up. And the first 5 games of the season, when Wood was a little bit slow off the mark, Barnes was on fire. He was the one everyone was talking about and get him in the England squad. And now Barnes has had a couple of drier games and also has now pulled that injury as well. Wood's really, really shining. But for me, I just think the relationship that they've formed between each other has got to be playing a huge part in that, because they are understanding each other's games, they are creating opportunities, and you don't see them tripping over each other like you maybe did when this relationship first formed. They're creating space that they didn't have before. They're not fighting for the same spot. They're not going for the same ball. And they know where the other one's going to be. And I think that makes a huge difference to our creativity. And also gives defenders a bit of a headache. If defenders only have to be in one spot because they're both of them going to the same area of the penalty box, then it just makes it easier for them to defend. Open up that box and force the defenders to be looking at all angles to try and see who they're supposed to mark, and do that combination of zonal marking and man marking. It just makes it tougher, and it just creates chances for us. And Tom, I agree with you. That's, I think, something that we're doing this season better than we have done in previous seasons. And it's Dyche talks, doesn't he, about the small steps and the learning curves that you go into each season. And I think that ability to just be a bit more sophisticated in the box, whether it's direct chances or just keeping possession there and keeping the pressure on the defenders, is something we've hugely improved on. So, Tom, on the opposite end, away from strikers and back to defenders, very weirdly, I thought our defence, generally speaking, had a good game at the weekend, apart from the 2 goals that we conceded. The first one is frustrating for so many levels. I think Vardy gets the better of Ben Mee, climbs onto him and just gets ahead when he shouldn't be able to. And Ben's usually quite good at stopping those. But also, I think the very late nature of the goal. How many times have we seen this Claret side either just before the whistle blows for half time or right at the end of the games, and you want to scream at them, don't you, Tom, to try and keep that concentration until half time?
Yeah, it had a massive impact on the mood in the stadium as well. I think Leicester getting that goal when they did. I wouldn't say there were sort of mumblings and frustrations, but there was in the home end, but there was a momentum that was picking up with us. I think the away end was getting more and more boisterous. He had Vardy slamming that shot into the side net in a few minutes before he scored, and a little bit of frustration was creeping in on his part as well. He had the taunts from the away end about the social media postings of his wife, and it sort of felt like we were going to go into the halftime break riding on the crest of a wave, and it was a really bad time to lose that bit of focus, and it put all the momentum back with Leicester going into the second half. And I think you saw for the first 20-25 minutes of the second half, we struggled to get a kick. Now, I think probably if we hadn't let that equaliser in, we perhaps would have come out defensive in the first 20-25 minutes anyway. But you prefer that to be back to the wall defending a goal lead as opposed to being one apiece and with the momentum taken away from you. So, yeah, the point at which the goal arrived, it did have a big impact on the game, I think.
Absolutely. We managed to keep that at 1-0 and just managed to regroup in the second half. And I think everybody's team talk is different at half time. And that said, we do seem to struggle a little bit in the first 10 minutes of the second half. But you just want to be able to go in there with that lead intact and just think about how you're going to approach that second half. So it is disappointing from that perspective. I think... How do we feel? The second goal, I think, is probably worse than the first, Tom. I keep tying it up. I just think the whole defence for the second goal. Tielemans had just so much space. And even when you look at it the first time as well, you look at it and you think, oh God, is Pope actually being a little bit static there as well? But I'm not sure he can do anything about it. And it felt to me like there was a collective lack of concentration for the second goal that I think was maybe more disappointing than the first. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think the frustration with these goals that come from crosses is we know we've seen over the years that the way the team is set up is to allow teams to put balls in the box and then defend them when they come in. So it's hard to get too frustrated when we don't stop the cross or when we haven't got the winger doubling up with the fullback to close the cross down, because we know from experience that we're not always going to do that, or the players aren't always told to do that. They're told to sort of stand off a little bit and let the crosses come in and defend them when they come in. But if you're going to be told to do that, then you have to defend them better than we did do on Saturday. I think for the first one, I think you already alluded to it, Ben Mee, you shouldn't be losing to Jamie Vardy in the air. I think Vardy's just read the ball a lot better than him. He's caught Mee on his heels. and he's made the jump, and he's give Pope no chance. The second one, I think the frustration for me, and it's similar to the goal at Villa, and that was another game where we've let two crosses come into the box and two goals conceded from them. For me, the second goal at Villa, Peter's got a lot of criticism for being beaten on the right and letting the cross come in. But for me, Loughton was asleep a little bit at the back post. He let McGinn drift in to score for 2-1 for that goal. And I personally, I thought Loughton was the man who was at fault for this goal as well. And I know they've managed to get the crossover when perhaps they shouldn't have. But for me, it was a good bit of play on the right. And sometimes you just have to hold your hands up and say, they've done well there. It's a good ball around the corner, and it's a good ball back from Gray. It's a clever ball as well. He doesn't just put it across the face of goal. He picks a man out. For me, though, Tielemans, he's got that space. And again, I think Loughton's perhaps lost his man a little bit at the back post. But he has two touches, Tielemans, before he gets the shot away, and it allows him to pick his spot. I mean, it's a great finish. He slams it in off the crossbar. I don't think Pope's got a chance. But for me, Loughton, he stands with his hands behind his back. For me, he should be running out to Tielemans because he's had two touches. And I think if Loughton goes out to the man and slides in, he blocks the shot for me. And I think because he's standing there with his arms behind his back, he lets Tielemans have that extra touch. He lets him pick his spot. And from then, there's no chance of blocking it. There's no chance of saving it. So that was the disappointment for that goal for me. Not so much what was happening out wide, but it's when the ball comes into the box. And it's something that, if we're going to keep conceding, 2 goals a game from crosses like that in the away games, then perhaps it needs a bit of a rethink as to how we defend those, or perhaps a bit of a rethink in terms of the personnel. But you can say everyone sort of lost concentration to a degree. But for me, like the centre halves, they've got to stick with their men in the middle. For me, the fault's with the fact that Loughton's let his man come in at the back post, and fair enough if he gets that touch, but you've got to come out a bit quicker for me as well. So for me, it wasn't so much collective. I think Loughton was the man to blame in that instance.
Poor Matty Lawton, feeling the wrath of Tom Whittaker's disappointment there. Goodness me, Tom, you're picking on that poor man. I was trying to be nice there and say, yeah, collectively they all need to do better, but Tom's like, no, Matt Lawton, you must do better. Good stuff. Okay, so the final part of our analysis from the Leicester game at the weekend is, of course, the equaliser that never was. VAR. How many times this season is our talking point in the podcast going to be some VAR controversy? Now, generally speaking, I've said this before, I'm still of the opinion that VAR for the objective decisions, i.e. offside or mistaken identity, is working really, really well. We may not like the fact that somebody's big toe, if somebody wears a size 9 and somebody else wears a size 7, they're going to be offside by virtue of having bigger feet, is a problem, but at least we're getting some consistency of decisions. For me, coming into the second, and obviously coming back after the second international break, VAR is now worse than it was at the beginning. I think at the start of the season, there was an element of patience with it. There was some willingness to let them iron out any wrinkles. But it's getting to the point now where it's turning into an absolute farce. A VARce, if you would. And this weekend, again, we had numerous incidents. Poor Watford conceded a late equaliser against Spurs, and Dele Alli clearly handled the ball, but no, we're not going to overrule that because that's not a clear and obvious error. There were issues in the United-Liverpool game, and it's just getting to the point where we are simply discussing incorrect VAR decisions rather than incorrect referee decisions. So nothing has changed. And the Premier League are under a huge amount of pressure here because this is the greatest domestic competition in the world and it needs world-class officiating, and VAR is making a mockery of it. That said, it's always going to feel worse when you're at the back end of one of those stories. Tom, we have seen it a million times. I still can't understand how the hell we didn't get that equaliser. I'm always willing to look at the opposing manager's reaction, and it said a lot to me that Brendan Rodgers wouldn't be drawn on this in his post-match interview, and he kind of said, well, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. We didn't get one a couple of weeks ago. Today it's fallen for us. Without saying it out and clearly, he obviously thought that they were very lucky there.
I think by any stretch of the definition of clear and obvious, that was not a refereeing decision. That was clearly and obviously incorrect. I think to look at it from the perspective, I know we've spoken a bit before on the programme about how it is to be a fan in the stadium when the VAR decision's made. And it was probably the worst experience I've had in terms of knowing what's going on. Obviously, the goal was down the far end from where the away end is, so the goal in inverted commas was down the far end. So initially, we saw the ball go in the net. Chris Wood wheels away. Now, he did look a little bit like he thought something might be coming because he wasn't going mad. He wasn't running about. I did wonder about his reaction. And then you see John Moss eventually, about 10 minutes after the ball's in the net, catches up with play. And you see him signal, and it was taking a long time. And I was thinking, the longer it's going on, the more you're thinking in the away end, well, obviously something's happening here. We didn't have a clue what it was going to be VAR'd or disallowed for. My assumption was, from the way that the ball had gone in, obviously Wood has the first shot, Schmeichel comes out really quick and makes a really good save, and then the ball hits Wood and eventually goes in. I'd assumed that it hit his hand or hit his arm and gone in, because I know that as we saw with the Mane goal on Sunday, if it hits your arm, it doesn't matter whether it's deliberate or not, it's disallowed now. And at least there's consistency and there's no ambiguity with that rule. So when eventually it was disallowed, I assumed it must have hit his hand, therefore it's been disallowed. Under the rules, you can't really complain about that. They showed one very quick replay of it on the big screen, and it was the side-on angle, and it was the one where, you'll know the one that I mean when I say it's the one where you can clearly see that Johnny Evans kicks himself in the back of his leg to fall over.
Yeah.
So they showed that angle in the stadium, and obviously you can't see anything hitting Wood's hand on there. I just assumed they'd showed the wrong angle, but obviously it transpires that it didn't hit his hand. And coming out the ground, you've got all the texts and all the tweets saying, we've just been robbed there. It was the wrong decision. And eventually when I did see it back and found out that it was for a trip, I don't know how many times they must have had to watch that to see the contact. And eventually you do see that when the ball's sort of on its way into the net already, Wood's foot does catch Evans' foot. But when you see the threshold that they've been using, and I think you're right, in terms of the objective decisions, you may not like it, but at least there's consistency there. That's the big word. In terms of the things that they are or are not overturning, it just seems completely arbitrary. And like some of the examples from Saturday, like the Villa goal that got disallowed because the centre forwards breathed on the goalkeeper when they've both gone for the ball. How is that being disallowed? Unbelievable. And some of the penalties that weren't given, the Watford one, Dale Lefebvre just gets taken out. And it's like, if that isn't clear and obvious, then what could be more clear and obvious than that decision? So you see decisions like that not being made, or being made for something that's nothing, absolutely incomparable amount of contact, or incomparable in terms of how obvious the decisions are. And it really is so frustrating. And there has to be a major rethink of how they're using the technology in these situations, because the point of bringing it in was supposed to be to get some consistency across the board, to eliminate these decisions that fans in the stadium or fans at home are watching and seeing are clearly wrong. And some of the ones that are given, like the Catroni one for Wolves, where he's got half his boot offside, fine, right decision, but that it wasn't brought in because people are complaining about decisions like that. It was brought in because people are complaining about decisions like the Dale Lefebvre one on Saturday, and it certainly wasn't brought in for decisions like the goal that we've had disallowed. So yeah, it really is frustrating. And I think you can almost understand why the decision's made. I think John Moss is so far behind the players so often is whenever he's refereeing a game that he probably can't make a decision either way, and that's why he's perhaps decided to let it go for now and defer to the VAR. Why you can't eventually walk over to the touchline and look at the screen on the side I don't know. Perhaps he wasn't brave enough to make the decision himself. But in terms of the decision itself, I can sort of see why they've given it if they've seen that angle. That I think they want to show match the day where the camera's behind Wood and Evans. You do see him catch his foot and Evans goes down. But then when you see the angle I spoke about before, Evans, he's kicked himself in the back of the leg because he knows he's not going to get that ball. And if I go down here, then there's maybe a chance that they overturn it. It's cynical. And the fact that whoever was watching on screen can look at that and say, yeah, clearly and obviously Wood is tricked Evans and stops him being able to get that ball. The mind boggles as to how he can reach that decision. And the fact that there doesn't seem to be any sort of high bar for overturning that goal, or goal in general, speaking, going back to the Aston Villa one that was disallowed. And yet there is such a high bar to give penalties. It's almost as if the VAR is being used not to try and facilitate goal being scored and facilitate correct decisions. It's almost as if they're starting with an incident and saying, what excuses can we come up with to disallow this? And that shouldn't be the mentality that's being used for. And that's what's really frustrating. I think if there was some consistency in the way that those decisions are being reached, or if there was the emphasis was on trying to make sure goals are given when they should be, rather than trying to stop goals being given, then perhaps it would be a bit easier to take. But really, I think, and even if you say, yeah, there was a bit of contact from Wood on Evans, I really don't think the VAR should be being used in that situation. Or really, I don't think the ref being overturned in that situation.
No, and I think that's where I wanted to pick up on this one. I kind of didn't want to interrupt you then because you were in full flow, and I was like, I hardly stopped for breath. That was amazing. I was like, Tom is nailing this. But I think there are two levels of this decision at the weekend for me. Number one, is the initial contact a foul? The answer for me is absolutely not. I just don't see how that is ever a foul. And secondly, even if it is determined that it is a foul, does that foul stop Evans from getting that ball and clearing it on the line? And I just don't think it does. I just don't think it's a foul anyway. And he's never getting there. The ball is almost across the line at the point that the contact is made. And I think that a couple of points that I think you made very well in that section then. Number one, there's this, the assumption that, the position that they come to where it says, what can we do to disallow this goal is a ridiculous, and you're absolutely right. That cannot be the benchmark that they are living by here. Secondly, there is now a new tactic being employed by, the pundits like to call them clever play, don't they? Which is a code for just cheating and manipulating the rules, essentially. But there is an opportunity here with the new handball rules. Strikers don't even need to go into a box anymore and try and actually score a goal. They either just kick it at somebody's hand and they get a penalty, or they just dive over and invite the slightest bit of contact, and it has to be a penalty because that's the new game. But interestingly, like you say, Evans has absolutely gone down there. You can tell it's not a natural fall. He takes a step and then goes, and falls over. And I'm absolutely convinced in his mindset, he knew that if he fell over there, he could have a chance that he could get that goal disallowed for his and save his side 3 points. And I think it's 2 points, sorry. And I think that is wrong, because VAR was supposed to bring fairness to the game and consistency, and it's now enabling players to manipulate that scenario to play unfairly and to win points that they've got no business winning. The other point that you mentioned, which was the second half that I wanted to talk about, was this question about why John Moss did not consult the screen. And I've been looking at this over since the weekend to try and find out what the problem is, because so far yet it's just not being used in the Premier League. And apparently a lot of this is down to I think it is the Professional Game Match Officials Limited, who are the governing body who deal with the referees and VAR. They're managing that. And whilst they are acknowledging that the referees can, if they want, go and have a look at a screen off the side of the pitch, they are not forcing them to do that, because what they're saying is that there has to be a balance between the fairness in the game, but also not impacting on the speed and the flow of the game. Now, that to me suggests that the entertainment factor, not slowing down the game, is more important than the actual fairness of it. They believe that it's going to take at least 90 seconds for a referee to go and check it. But at the weekend, Tom, you were at the ground. If John Moss had gone to the side of that pitch and looked at that for himself, you wouldn't have cared if it was 90 seconds that he was reviewing that. Because to me, I think I would feel more comfortable with a referee looking again and either affirming his own decision or changing his mind than somebody sat in Milton Keynes who's got no who's just looking at this on a screen. I don't know. That to me feels a bit better if you're allowing the referees to take ownership of their own decisions.
Yeah, I can understand the not wanting to take, sometimes when we saw it in the World Cup when it was first brought in, for example, it was taking 2-3 minutes to reach decisions, and it did get slightly farcical. But it's not as if it's rapid anyway. I mean, it probably took a good minute to disallow it to start with, so it's not as if the flow of the game hasn't already been disrupted and interrupted by VAR regardless. I think so. I'm not saying use the screen every time and the ref needs to see every incident. If there's one that's clear, like for example the Mane one on Sunday, it's clearly handball. We don't need to get someone over to the side of the pitch for someone to tell the ref that that's handball and it should be disallowed. Fine, but I think what the other thing that's really frustrating. I mean, Moss is so far behind the play when the goal goes in that there's no way that he could have given a decision one way or the other on the initial one. So essentially, I think he's just abdicated himself of the responsibility and allowed the VAR checking referee to make the decision for him. But surely, I mean, as we've said already, there's no way that that VAR referee could have watched that and said that's clearly a foul, because it's not clear. And there's angles where you can see the contact, and there's other angles where it very much looks like a dive. So you'd think in that situation, if Moss hasn't seen the original one, and unless he's got the eyesight of an eagle, he hasn't seen it because he's, as I say, so far behind the play. You think if he's not seen the initial one, and if surely the VAR official can't be telling him, 100% it's a foul, and he'd be crazy not to overrule it. Surely in that situation, he'd want to have a second look. And surely if there's any sort of appropriate time to be using that second screen, that's when it is. So that was, and if it had taken another minute and we got the right decision out of it, then you couldn't have complained. And I very much doubt, had that goal been given, there'd be any Leicester City fans who were complaining and saying how hard done by they were, because they've got away with one. So I mean, it's in principle, then this saying, let's have a high bar and not use it too often, and let's not waste more time with the screen, it's noble. But if you don't want to if you don't want to overturn decisions and you don't want to impact on the flow and take time, then why bring it in the first place?
Absolutely. I could not have said that better myself. All I've been whinging about to my other half, to Mr. B, since Saturday is why have they brought VAR in? If fairness, if entertainment's more important than fairness, if they're not prepared to use it for what it's been brought in for, what is the point of having it? And I'm sick of having to talk about this every single week and talking about VAR decisions that have not gone right. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm finding myself really frustrated with this, and I don't know what else to say other than the arguments that you guys have heard me say over and over again about this. It needs to change, and do you know what? Do you know what even got me? Even Sky Sports said that we'd been absolutely shafted. And when Sky are on Burnley's side and actually starting a crusade for Burnley, then you know that something has gone wrong. But listen, guys, what did you think? Is there anybody out there who actually thought it was completely the correct decision and that we shouldn't have got that goal? Or is there anybody out there who knows what they think they'd like to see from VAR? Keep the discussion going. You know how to get in touch with us. You can tweet us at no nay never, or you can send us an email at podcast@nonaynever.net. That is all we have time for this week. Guys, I'm sorry that it has been dominated once again by the VARce that is VAR. We have a podcast title there, I think. But unfortunately, that's what it is, and it hurts at any point. But when it's a justified equaliser, a really hard-earned equaliser away from home with just 10 minutes to go on the clock, when you know Burnley have the ability to see out that game, then you know that it's going to sting. And I think it's got to change, because we can't have a situation here where we've got something that's designed to bring fairness to the game that is doing anything but. So let us know what you think. My thanks this week go to Tom Whittaker and his glorious, wonderful monologues about VAR and all things claret and blue. It's always a pleasure. It's always quite an easy podcast when Tom's on as well, because I can just sit back and press mute and let him go on his little crusades. I love it. Thanks to producer Matt for editing and putting together this podcast this week. Thanks to band Joyce, who provide our music. But finally, thanks to you, the listener, for downloading and listening to this episode. Your support is hugely appreciated, and we would not be here without you. I will be back on Friday with the preview show where we're looking at Chelsea at home. Frank Lampard's Chelsea is coming to Turf Moor at the weekend for the Saturday night game live on Sky Sports, and Dave and I will be looking at all the stats ahead of that game in the preview show. And myself and the team will be back this time next week to look at what happened against Chelsea and hopefully talk about 3 lovely home points. And you never know, a VAR decision may very well go for us. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the None and Never podcast. Until next time.